Today, we're going to talk about one of the most fascinating and honestly complicated figures in all of history, Kublai Khan. He's the grandson of Genghis Khan, a name that brings to mind conquest and terror. But Kublai was also something else entirely, a builder of nations, a lover of the arts, and the very first non-Chinese emperor to rule all of China. His life is just a masterclass in contradiction. And that really gets us to the heart of it, doesn't it? Was this man a brutal conqueror just following the family business of bloodshed and domination? Or was he a true visionary, a creator who pulled a fractured country together and kicked off a golden age? Well, as we're about to find out, the answer is he was both. You see, to really get Kublai, you have to understand that he was a man torn between two completely different worlds. On one side, you've got his Mongol heritage, the ways of the steppe. This guy was born a nomadic warrior, raised to live and conquer on horseback. But on the other side, he was captivated by China and its mandate of heaven, this idea that a just ruler had divine approval to govern. He wasn't content to be a wandering warlord. He wanted to be the emperor of China, ruling from a palace, founding a dynasty. This massive conflict is what shaped his entire life. So how in the world does a nomadic prince end up becoming the ruler of what was then the most advanced civilization on the planet? Well, his path to the throne was anything but simple. It was a journey shaped by Mongol brutality and a deep, genuine fascination with Chinese culture. Okay, so let's track his climb up the ladder. He's born in 1215, and by 1251, he's put in charge of northern China, where he starts getting a taste for a different way of ruling, surrounding himself with Chinese advisors. But the real game changer comes in 1259. His brother, the great Khan Mongke, dies suddenly. Instantly, there's a huge power vacuum, and it sparks a massive succession crisis. This is Kublai's moment. A year later, he gets his supporters together and has himself elected Great Khan. But here's the thing. It wasn't that easy. His younger brother, Arik Boka, was also declared Great Khan way back in the traditional Mongol capital. And this wasn't just a squabble between brothers over who gets the crown. No, this was a full-blown civil war for the soul of the Mongol Empire. Arik Boka was the traditionalist. He had the backing of the old Mongol elite who wanted to keep things the way they'd always been. And then you had Kublai, the visionary, the guy they thought had gone soft and become too Chinese, who wanted to rule from a fixed city and adopt Chinese methods. That war raged for 4 long, brutal years. But in the end, Kublai's forces won, and Arik Boka was forced to surrender. Kublai's victory was total. It didn't just cement his own power, it set the entire future of the empire on a new course, one that pointed directly towards China. Okay, so this civil war is over, and Kublai is now the undisputed ruler. He can finally turn all his energy to his biggest project yet, actually building a new China and turning the Mongol conquest into a real, lasting dynasty. This is where the creator in him really steps into the light. And you have to appreciate the sheer scale of what he was working with. It's just mind-boggling. At its height, the Mongol Empire under Kublai controlled roughly 1/5 of the world's entire populated landmass. Think about that. From the Pacific Ocean all the way to the Black Sea, it was one of the largest empires in human history. Now, to rule an empire that huge, Kublai knew he had to innovate. In 1271, he officially founded the Yuan Dynasty, basically telling the world, we're here to stay. He moved the capital to a new city he built, Dadu, which is modern-day Beijing. He introduced the world's first unified paper money, which was a huge deal for the economy. He poured resources into big infrastructure projects like the Grand Canal, and crucially, he secured the Silk Road, which opened up a direct highway for trade and ideas between China and the West. And you know who noticed? Marco Polo. The famous Venetian traveler described Kublai's court just like this. Now, historians still argue about Marco Polo's journey, but his account gave Europe this incredible, almost mythical picture of a staggeringly wealthy and powerful emperor. It just shows you how impressive Kublai's empire really was at its peak. And all of this led to one of the most important periods in world history, the Pax Mongolica, or the Mongol Peace. For the first time, a single power controlled that massive land route across Eurasia. And that meant relative peace and stability. It was suddenly safe to travel and trade. So goods, inventions, ideas, even religions started flowing between East and West like never before. But, and there's always a but with Kublai Khan, all of this progress, all this creation, it came at a horrifying cost. We can't talk about the creator without talking about the conqueror, because that brutal, ruthless edge was always there,
just as terrifying as his grandfather's.
Yeah, the builder was also a destroyer. His armies perfected the art of the starvation siege, like at Shenyang, where they surrounded the city for 5 years, just waiting for everyone inside to starve. They carried out horrific massacres in places that dared to resist. And to make sure his throne was secure, he had the entire royal family of the old Song dynasty wiped out, men, women, and children, so no one could ever challenge his claim. And he used terror as a weapon, making sure stories of Mongol cruelty spread far and wide so that cities would surrender without a fight. But even Kublai's power had its limits. His greatest, most humiliating failures came when he tried to invade Japan. He became absolutely obsessed with conquering it. He sent a huge fleet in 1274. It failed. So what does he do? He doubles down, building a second, even bigger armada in 1281. We're talking 140,000 men and 4,000 ships, one of the largest naval forces the world had ever seen. And both times, his fleets were annihilated by massive freak typhoons. The Japanese were convinced these weren't ordinary storms. They believed the gods themselves had sent the winds to protect their islands, and they gave them a name, kamikaze, which means divine winds. For an emperor who seemed unstoppable, this was an unbelievable blow. It was proof that he wasn't invincible after all. And even back home, inside his own empire, things weren't as stable as they seemed. Kublai created this incredibly rigid, four-tiered social system. At the very top, of course, were the Mongols. Right below them were their foreign allies, people from Central Asia and Europe. And at the very bottom were the native Chinese subjects. The southern Chinese, the last group he conquered, were treated the worst. This system created deep, simmering resentment that would eventually boil over. The last chapter of Kublai Khan's life is actually pretty tragic. The emperor who had conquered so much, who commanded armies and built cities, was ultimately defeated, not by an enemy army, but by grief and the failures of his own body. It all started to unravel in 1281. That year, his favorite wife, Empress Chabi, died. She wasn't just his wife, she was his closest friend and most trusted advisor. Then, just 4 years later, his oldest son and chosen heirs, Genjin, also died. Losing them both, one after the other, it just completely shattered him. Without them, Kublai just fell into a deep, dark depression. The discipline that had defined his life was gone. He turned to the only comfort he could find, food and alcohol. He started hosting these endless, lavish feasts and drinking heavily, just trying to numb the pain. And his body paid the price. He became massively overweight. He developed crippling gout, which made even walking an excruciating torture. He got diabetes and suffered from strokes. It's such a tragic image. The mighty warrior who once stormed across Asia on horseback could barely even move. He was a prisoner in his own body. So, when Kublai Khan finally died in 1294, what was he leaving behind? Well, his legacy is every bit as complicated and contradictory as the man himself. He wasn't a hero, and he wasn't a villain. He was something much more complex. When you lay it all out, you see these two sides so clearly. I mean, his achievements were immense. He unified China after 300 years of division. He created the Pax Mongolica. But his failures were just as big. A discriminatory social system, millions dead in his conquests, disastrous military campaigns. I think the most important takeaway is that you can't have one without the other. In his story, the creator and the conqueror were truly one and the same person. And maybe this is the most telling detail of all. His grand dynasty, it didn't last. Not even a century after he died, a rebellion rose up, overthrew the Yuan Dynasty, and kicked the Mongols out of China for good. It really makes you think that this whole massive enterprise was held together by one thing and one thing only, the incredible, unique force of Kublai Khan's will. So we come back to that first question, but now maybe we see it differently. Was he a visionary builder or a brutal tyrant? Or maybe, just maybe, history shows us that to do something that big, to change the world on that kind of scale, a great leader almost has to be both. That's definitely something worth thinking about. Thanks for joining me.